Going through depression is really, really hard, right?
Totally.
And when you're going through it, it can be really hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel or to feel like there's an end to it because
Yeah.
you're so stuck in the sadness. But I hear how there was this momentum that started of like once you got that clarity, once you got that help, yes, you started to change, but not only did you start to change, it has led you to do the work that you do now
Yeah.
and how passionate you are in being able to help others who identify with the experiences that you've personally had. Welcome back to Latine ADHD. I am your host, Dr. Janice Castro, a licensed psychologist. Just as a reminder that this podcast and this episode is not a replacement for therapy. In today's episode, guess what we're going to talk about? ADHD, as we always do. However, today we're talking about ADHD, masculinity, and healing. I'm so excited because I'm joined by Marc Almodovar, a life coach, community builder, social media influencer, and founder of the largest ADHD support group for los hombres, for men. Marc was diagnosed with ADHD at 16 years old. And since then, he's made it his mission to change how we talk about ADHD in men, especially within the BIPOC community. Today, he shares his story as a Latino who was diagnosed. He talks about the stigma and why vulnerability is super important and why it's also important to focus on strengths. If you've ever felt like you had to tough it out, this episode is for you. I was really happy that we got to make this happen because I know you do a lot of work within the ADHD community. And I would like for us to talk about your personal experience. And so I was hoping we could start with you sharing what led to your ADHD diagnosis and how did being a Latino shape your experiences with your mental health?
Yeah. So I always love when I got to speak on this because the whole Latino experience as an ADHD or something that I'm a really big fan of just having a public space to talk about it because for the longest time we were kind of a really underrepresented part of the ADHD community and we have our own individual experiences. But yeah, I mean, I'm Puerto Rican and Cuban. I grew up in Washington Heights, New York City, so a lot of Dominicans and Puerto Ricans and whatnot. And growing up as a kid, I knew I was always a little bit different. There was something different about how this brain worked. I just had this internal knowing
Yeah.
where I was the kid in kindergarten and elementary school with the disorganized desks and the sloppy handwriting and all that. And although the hyperactivity wasn't really there as it typically is in boys and men,
Mm-hmm.
the hyperactivity was more in my mind. The report cards would typically say things like Mark is there, but not really there,
Mm.
right? But on the flip side of being highly distracted in class, there was also very, very high levels of attention towards the things that actually caught my interest. Like I was really into Batman and a variety of other things, and not only did I like them, but my birthday parties were all Batman themed. I knew all the writers and directors as a
Oh,
kid, and I had
wow.
the toy collections. So it was a very like my brain was always either fully off on a subject or completely on.
Mm.
And I've always known I've had this dichotomy. But when I was 16 years old in high school, that's where things really started to shift for me. During that time, I was most certainly lacking in the confidence department. I didn't really appreciate what I saw when I looked in the mirror and was struggling in school. My social life wasn't where it really needed to be. And that was the first time in my life where I kind of hit a little bit of a low. And well, that's not properly explaining what I had. I mean, I was severely depressed. I was
Mm.
really, really struggling. And that was the
Yeah.
first time in my life where I kind of was honest with myself and knew that I needed some help.
Yeah. And I
Because
imagine at 16,
yeah,
and given, like you mentioned, coming from a Latino background,
oh yeah,
I'm thinking even having the terminology to recognize that you're depressed can be really
Yeah.
hard to know something doesn't feel right, but also sometimes it can be hard to put the words to it. And I wonder, did you struggle with that? Did you notice, oh, yeah, this is depression?
I mean, the initial thoughts was that it was probably nothing. I mean, and nothing worth taking seriously. Because I never, to be honest with you, I'd never heard about somebody, at least within my family or in my close circles at the time, doing some type of treatment or get some type of support for their mental health struggles. I mean,
Yeah.
if anything, and I'm not super educated on the subject outside of my personal experience, but and my experience coming from a Cuban household and being
Can't
around
forget
a
the
lot of
Puerto Rican
Dominican,
side.
right, the Puerto Rican side too, that wasn't, I had never seen somebody struggle with mental health and actually
Yeah.
seek support from it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? We kind of just dealt with it or pretended like it wasn't a big deal. So
Yes.
there was that. And so that definitely delayed a lot of myself getting progress. But at this point, when it reached such a low, I was like, there's something going on here. Like I don't want to be somebody who turns into this really wounded individual that ends up hurting others as a result, as well as further hurting myself.
Mm.
And I want to be different, right? Because in my family, and I'm sure a lot of Latino people can relate, emotional dysregulation is quite a thing. And, we often, at least in my experience, I've seen many moments where older people in my family had moments of lashing out, uncontrolled anger, and everything like that. And I just wanted what was best for me. I had that internal knowing at such a young age, fortunately. So I ended up getting the help that I needed. I saw a psychiatrist, started doing therapy, and went through this long testing of different ADHD screening things. I remember this one thing was like 15 minutes of seeing different letters pop up, and every time the letter X came up, I would hit the space bar, and it was very clear in that moment that something was going on.
Yeah.
And I had gotten my first ever diagnosis of a combined type of ADHD, but definitely predominantly on the inattentive side. Like
Mm.
I remember the psychiatrist told me, like, you can sit on a chair, but you won't be still in that chair. You're constantly fidgeting around and all that type of stuff.
Mm.
So yeah, I got that diagnosis and I was like, whoa, like that makes so much sense. I saw the description of it, the things that people with ADHD struggle with, the things that we're good at. And I was like, that is me. And a huge sense of relief just came about. I finally understand how my brain works. And I
Mm.
have a confidence now that there's something that I can do about it. And that was
Yeah.
such a transformative moment for me.
Yeah, that really does sound very transformational
Yeah.
because I think about myself at 16 or in high school. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, I don't know if I was depressed or anxious, but I'm sure I was struggling mentally because, like you said, something that can be common is emotional dysregulation growing
Yeah.
up because in the Latino culture, we don't talk about getting help.
Right.
I too grew up seeing a lot of emotional dysregulation at home where my mom describes herself as very impulsive
Yeah.
and it was really hard when you see others are not able to manage their emotions, but they're not doing anything about it. So then you're
Right.
just like, okay, then I guess I just got to suck it up and just figure this out too.
Right.
But when I myself went through a depressive episode when I was in grad school, I realized, oh, this is not okay. And it's
Right.
that moment when you're like, this is not okay. To be
Yeah.
able to do something about it and to seek out that help is such a huge step.
Yeah, definitely. And throw on top of that too, like not just like the Latino experience, but also the experience that a lot of men have when it comes to seeking mental health, because we're kind of taught that doing something like therapy or taking a medication if you need to for your ADHD is something that's seen as a weakness, to be quite
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah.
So it's a big block that I definitely took on and encourage others to take down too, that, getting this type of support could be a good thing because growing up, like you mentioned, I dealt with what I call as a very different version of CBT, where it's Cuban behavioral therapy as opposed to cognitive
I've
behavioral
never
therapy.
heard that one before.
And it includes a much impulsivity and the chancleta and all types of things. And you know, it's kind of like what I think the work that you're doing and myself and others, like we're doing the work of breaking that generational trauma and choosing to be better for ourselves and be better for future generations too. So yeah,
Yeah, definitely. I think by being able to talk about this and break those cycles of generational trauma,
right,
it is hard work, and it's also very rewarding and very valuable when we think about the impact that it makes, not just for our own well-being, but for the well-being in the relationships that we have with others
right,
and, like you said, like future generations.
yeah.
I was curious when you found out that you had ADHD because the psychiatrist had given you the diagnosis. How did your family respond?
At first, there was some doubt about it, right? Because like there was some question as to whether ADHD was real or not.
Mm,
Like a lot of it was seen as a discipline issue and somebody
yeah.
that needs to work a little bit harder. It could be a little bit lazy. Common misconceptions about ADHD, but I guess I had this confidence in it that I can't really explain super well, but I just knew that it was something legitimate, right? So despite the closed-mindedness that was met with,
Mm,
I was still able to go forward a little bit later on with taking my ADHD seriously. And as I started to grow and change, most people that know me now and knew me back then just see the night and day difference in who I am.
mm.
That was kind of like that growth that started to happen was kind of the convincing thing for a lot of my family members. Like maybe there was some truth to those words that were said and some of the practices that I took on because
Yeah.
clearly it worked. So
Yeah, yeah. And
yeah,
I think that the suspicion that comes from family, or I think about parents or guardians, is also coming from a protective place
yeah,
sometimes, right?
totally.
Because they're just trying to make sure like you're not labeling my child with something that could,
Right,
lead to very severe changes or what's going to happen to them. Because I think sometimes parents might see it or family members might see it as, was it my parenting that led to this? Like,
right.
is this why
Yeah.
this is happening?
Yeah, and funny enough, my mom, who I think is totally shows traits of inattentive ADHD. She's never gotten an actual diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
But despite a lot of my family at the time feeling that way, my mother actually kind of met that with a lot of, I guess, self-doubt and guilt, thinking that she failed her son and everything like that. And like now looking back at that, I'm like, that was one of the best things. You helping me as a parent get that diagnosis and get the help that I needed. That was one of the most transformative things for me and led to me doing the work that I do today that helps so many people. So yeah, at that time especially, it was a lot of stigma that was coming along with that diagnosis.
For sure. I mean, you're right. That sounds like such a huge turning point for you because
Yeah,
you described how getting the diagnosis and understanding, reading through the description of what it looks like,
right.
provided you that clarity and understanding of, oh, okay, this makes sense. This is how my brain works. So you
Yeah,
get that clarity, but also you brought up how other people started to see you differently. That you said it was like night and day when you think back to pre-diagnosis versus now.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's been huge, and there's a lot of different routes that can go with that, but there's just a lot of benefit in understanding how you work, like what is the nature of your brain, what works for it, what doesn't,
Yeah.
and it's a feeling that I truly believe everybody should have, especially neurodivergent people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Definitely. And I think it's so beautiful how this point in your life where it was very painful, like going through depression is really really hard, right?
totally.
And when you're going through it, it can be really hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel or to feel like there's an end to it because you're
Yeah,
so stuck in the sadness. But I think that I hear how there was this momentum that started of like once you got that clarity, once you got that help, yes, you started to change, but not only did you start to change, it has led you to do the work that you do now
yeah,
and how passionate you are in being able to help others who identify with the experiences that you've personally had. And the fact
Right.
that you've been able to create that change for yourself and your life and turn it around that way, I think is the beautiful part that I just wanted to highlight, because
Yeah.
so easily we can get caught up like, all right, well, I don't know what to do. Or sometimes our pride gets in the way of getting help. Or
Right.
sometimes we just don't even know the resources or have access to it.
Right. Definitely. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no doubt. And pretty much like whenever I'm doing something like this, whenever I'm speaking in front of everybody or writing a piece of content, I always think about when I was that age, when I was 16 and severely depressed and everything like that, what are the words that I wanted to hear, right? What are the things that I would have benefited from? And that brings out such a passionate and excited version of me. And it was a difficult time for sure back then, but it's led to so much knowledge and help for this ADHD community. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
definitely. I agree with you wholeheartedly, because while I don't have ADHD, but I mentioned to you like I've been diagnosed with depression before. That first time that I actually sought out help, not only just with therapy but with medication,
Hmm.
then it gave me so much self-awareness. So I was like, oh, okay. I would benefit from thinking about self-care. And like now you start to learn the things that you can do to help yourself.
Right. Definitely. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's huge.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of different strategies with what helps folks with ADHD. And I wanted to ask, what would be one message that you would want other Latina men with ADHD to hear?
Yeah. So when I think about navigating ADHD, I mean, there's really wonderful productivity hacks out there that you
Mm,
can indulge in, like Pomodoro techniques, like sleep and exercise. These are all really, really great things. But I think the ultimate thing with navigating ADHD is really understanding yourself and getting that self-talk right. That is such a big thing for people with ADHD.
mm,
We are our own worst enemy oftentimes.
oh,
When we make a mistake, I mean, we'll make it far more than that mistake, right?
mm,
We'll think we're the worst person ever. We'll never do that thing again. And it's a rough dialogue that goes on internally. But what I'm a big believer in is doing the therapy and doing the coaching and support groups and all that to get yourself to the point where you can start having a little bit of grace with yourself.
yeah.
That is the ultimate thing, right? Because I have read all the Russell Barkley books and Dr. Ned Hollowell, and I've attended multiple ADHD conferences and everything like that. But still to this day, I can do something like agree to do a podcast and forget that I agreed to do it, right? Or find my time management not to be the best, or be a little bit impulsive and everything like that. And what has really, really been key for me is understanding when I have a moment like that, where maybe I'm not my best self, right? Understanding that that moment does not define me and I
Mm,
can still keep my head up, right? I can
yeah.
still look at myself and say, shoot, maybe I'm not the best person with time management, or maybe I'm not the most organized individual on the planet, but I have so many other strengths. And on top of that, too, this is what I can learn from the moments where I do mess up, right? If I miss a flight or am a little bit late to something, it's like, okay, cool. Like maybe next time I'll put a Google Calendar reminder half an hour before or something like that, just to make sure that I'm on time. But there's learning in these shortcomings, and we just don't have to define ourselves by them.
I think that's such a great message, because you're right. There are a lot of different resources, tools, and strategies for being productive, managing your time.
Yeah,
And when you bring up the importance of that self talk and compassion of giving oneself, it really makes such a huge difference. And it
yeah,
can be so hard, because I think that sometimes when we don't grow up learning what
right.
compassion is, because I didn't even know what it was until I went to grad school.
Yeah,
Sometimes we mistake that compassion as like, oh, I'm letting myself off the hook. Or like, if I'm not hard on myself, then I'm not going to do it.
right. Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a way to have self accountability in a way that's healthy.
Yes.
That's what I'm a big fan of, healthy self-accountability. It's understanding, I guess, the learnings in situations where you quote unquote fall short,
Mm.
but also understanding that that's just not what defines you. You can grow through your struggles confidently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
Yeah,
you know, when you say that you can grow through your struggles with confidence, I think that speaks to the perseverance that
yeah,
exists within the ADHD community
totally.
because when you're navigating this neurotypical world that wasn't built for ADHD brains, there's going to be, like you said, mistakes with missing a flight or forgetting to
Yeah,
show up to something that you were scheduled for. And in a
right.
neurotypical world, there's judgment, right? Of like,
Yeah,
well, it was on your calendar, there was a reminder, right? And so people don't get it, they just judge.
yeah,
But I think that when you do reflect on how many times those mistakes happen, it can lead to a lot of self critical talk and
yeah,
also recognizing like it's not just you, right? It is also the system that you're under, and also being able to have grace in those moments. But because that happens so frequently,
yeah,
at least until you figure out what works sometimes, that really builds that perseverance.
totally. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, people with ADHD have a lot of strength. That's for sure.
For
Because,
sure.
and I talked about like me getting diagnosed when I was 16. Like in our community, I have seen members come in entirely new, and sometimes they're in their late 50s, one as old as like 70 something, and talking about just having learned about ADHD for the first time. And it's impressive the level of strength that that takes, right? It's like you lived your pretty much your whole life not understanding how your brain works, and here you are still showing up, coming back the next day. That's strength that deserves a lot of recognition, in my opinion,
Yeah.
especially from our own selves.
Yeah. And it can be hard sometimes to embrace the strengths. I think about, especially within like our Latinx community, it it reminds me of how one of the common cultural values is humility, like keeping
Yeah.
ourselves humble and working really hard and not really complaining about how hard things are and just keep pushing forward. And I
Hmm.
think that while it is very beautiful to be humble because it does allow us to reflect on our areas of growth because we are
Totally.
imperfect human beings, I think we can hold space for that humility as a beautiful cultural value and also recognize that we can appreciate ourselves and talk about our strengths.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Mm,
It's a great thing to highlight who you are and actually accept compliments when you receive it. Because I see that a lot with the
yeah.
ADHD community. It's like, oh, I got this promotion at work, but I don't think I really deserved it. They were probably just thinking, let's just be nice or something like that. And but no,
Mm.
like own your compliments, own your wins, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's a great thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, as we start wrapping up, what offerings do you have that you would like folks to hear about?
Yeah. So what my work is in the ADHD community, I do tap into the whole Latino experience as well. That's a conversation that just recently started happening for me. But I've definitely been more in the men's mental health side of things in the past few years. And
Mm-hmm.
I run a nonprofit for men with ADHD called Men's ADHD Support Group.
Yeah.
And we're all about empowering and educating men with ADHD to take down some of those traditional masculine values of overworking yourself, not prioritizing your mental health, and showing these men that it's okay to be a human being and have emotions and talk about them too and learn from others who relate to you. So the Men's ADHD Support Group is on Facebook, Discord. You just Google that and you'll find our website with all of our different offerings. And we have quite a wonderful community of men with ADHD supporting each other.
Yeah, you do. I've heard great things. Clearly, I am not a part of it, but I have heard great things about the group, and I'm so glad that y'all continue to have it. And where can folks find you?
Yeah, so on all of our social media, Men's ADHD Support Group is it's literally the handle and the
Mm-hmm.
title.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I post most of my ADHD and mental health related content.
Oh.
And then on my Instagram handle, it's a bit of a handful of letters and stuff, but it's my first and last name, Junior, Marc Almodovar Junior on
Yeah.
Instagram. Honestly,
Okay.
if you look up the Men's ADHD Support Group on any social media platform, you'll find me too. So yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll make sure to include that in the show notes for people to have access to it. And thank you
Cool.
so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This is really fun.
A huge thank you to Marc for joining us and for sharing and being vulnerable with his story and the powerful work that he's doing to support men with ADHD. If you took something away from this episode, a new insight, a sense of hope, or just the reminder that you're not alone, I'd love for you to share this episode with someone who you think would benefit from it. And you can also leave a quick review or a rating. It really helps others find the show. Thank you again for being part of the Latine ADHD community. I'll see you next time, and keep showing up just as you are.